In a quiet little town surrounded by rolling hills and golden fields of wheat, there lived a boy named Ezra. He was 12 years old, with messy brown hair that always seemed to stick out in odd directions. His eyes were wide and curious, like he was constantly searching for answers to questions no one else thought to ask. But despite his bright mind, Ezra wasn't very talkative. At school, kids often teased him for being different. They said he spent too much time daydreaming and not enough time playing games or making friends. Even his parents worried about him, though they never said it out loud. Every night after dinner and chores, Ezra would climb onto the roof of his family's farmhouse. It was his favorite place in the whole world. From up there, he could see the endless sky above him, filled with stars that twinkled like tiny diamonds. On clear nights, the moon shone so brightly that it lit up the fields around their home. Ezra loved staring at the moon. To him, it felt like an old friend, a silent companion who listened without judgment. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ezra lay on the rooftop, gazing at the glowing crescent moon. The air was cool, and the only sounds came from crickets chirping in the distance. For some reason, Ezra felt unusually lonely that night. Maybe it was because none of the other kids at school understood him, or maybe it was because he had been thinking about how big the universe was, and how small he felt compared to it. Feeling a lump in his throat, Ezra whispered into the dark, "Does anyone out there feel as alone as I do?" He didn't expect an answer. After all, talking to the moon was just something he did when he needed to let his thoughts escape. But moments later, something strange happened. The moon seemed to glow brighter for a brief second, almost like it was responding to his words. Ezra blinked, unsure if he had imagined it. He sat up straight, his heart pounding. Had the moon really reacted to what he said? Curious, Ezra tried again. This time he spoke louder. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Once more, the moon pulsed softly, its light flickering as if it were alive. Ezra's breath caught in his chest. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out toward the sky, even though he knew he couldn't touch the moon. "Who are you?" he asked hesitantly. A voice not spoken aloud but felt deep within his mind replied, "I am Lenara." Ezra froze. Was he dreaming? Hallucinating? Surely the moon couldn't talk, could it? Yet the voice sounded calm and gentle, like a teacher explaining something important to a student. It wasn't scary. It was comforting, almost familiar. "What are you?" Ezra whispered, still unsure whether to believe what was happening. "I am an ancient consciousness," Lunara explained. "Long ago, I was created to watch over worlds and guide civilizations. But my creators disappeared, and I have been waiting for someone like you." Ezra's head spun. Ancient consciousness. Creators? None of it made sense. But somehow he believed her. Over the next few nights, Ezra continued speaking to Lunara. Each conversation revealed new pieces of her story. She told him about her creators, a highly advanced race that had built her and others like her to monitor younger species across galaxies. Their goal was to help these species grow and evolve peacefully. But then something went wrong. Her creators vanished mysteriously, leaving Lunara and the others behind, stranded and forgotten. As their bond grew stronger, strange things began happening to Ezra. During the day, he started hearing faint whispers in his mind, like echoes of Lunara's voice. Sometimes he saw fleeting shadows shaped like craters or streaks of silver light out of the corner of his eye. At first, he thought he was losing his grip on reality. But Lunara reassured him that these sensations were side effects of their connection. She was sharing parts of herself with him, teaching him how to understand her better. Despite the wonder of it all, Ezra struggled to keep his secret. No one else could know about Lunara. Not his parents, not his sister Mira, and definitely not the kids at school. If they found out, they'd think he was crazy. So he kept quiet, pretending everything was normal while carrying this incredible burden inside him. But keeping secrets isn't easy, especially when the world starts noticing changes. Scientists around the globe began detecting unusual activity coming from the moon. Instruments designed to measure its gravitational pull showed fluctuations that couldn't be explained. News reports speculated about possible alien interference, sparking both excitement and fear among people everywhere. Back in Ezra's town, neighbors gathered outside at night, pointing at the sky and wondering what was going on. Ezra watched silently from his rooftop, guilt gnawing at him. He knew he was responsible for the changes everyone was talking about. Every time he spoke to Lunara, she grew stronger, and the moon reacted more noticeably. Part of him wanted to tell someone, to share the amazing truth, but another part was terrified of what might happen if he did. One night, as he stared at the glowing orb above him, Ezra sighed. "Why did you choose me?" he asked Lunara. "I'm just a kid. I don't know anything." Lunara's response came softly, like a warm breeze brushing against his cheek. "You may be young, Ezra, but your heart is pure. You see the universe not as something distant and cold, but as a place full of wonder and possibility. That is why I chose you." Her words brought tears to Ezra's eyes. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he belonged somewhere, even if that somewhere was millions of miles away on the surface of the moon. As days turned into weeks, Ezra's connection with Lunara grew stronger. Each night, he climbed onto the rooftop, eager to learn more about her mysterious past and the advanced civilization that had created her. Lunara shared fragments of her story slowly, like a teacher guiding a student through a complicated lesson. She told him how her creators, beings far older and wiser than humans, had built her and others like her as guardians of the galaxy. Their purpose was simple yet profound: to watch over younger species, helping them grow without interfering too much. But then something went terribly wrong. Her creators vanished, leaving behind only whispers of their existence. Without them, Lunara and the other guardians fell silent, drifting aimlessly through space and time. For thousands of years, she remained trapped on the moon, unable to fulfill her mission or communicate with anyone. Until now. Ezra listened intently, his mind racing with questions. "Why did your creators leave?" he asked one night, his voice trembling slightly. Lunara hesitated before answering. "I do not know," she admitted. "Perhaps they moved on to another plane of existence, or perhaps they were destroyed." Her tone carried a sadness so deep that it made Ezra's chest ache. It was hard to imagine such powerful beings disappearing forever. Despite the weight of her words, Ezra couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. He was part of something bigger than himself, a cosmic mystery waiting to be unraveled. But the more he learned, the harder it became to keep Lunara's secret. During the day, strange things kept happening. The faint whispers in his mind grew louder, almost like Lunara was practicing speaking through him. Shadows shaped like craters followed him wherever he went, even indoors. And sometimes, when he touched metal objects, they felt unnaturally cold, as if the moon itself were reaching out to him. At school, Ezra struggled to act normal. His classmates noticed that he seemed distracted, always staring off into space or muttering under his breath. One boy named Liam teased him relentlessly. "What's wrong with you, Ezra? You're acting like a lunatic," he said during lunch one day, earning laughs from the others. Ezra clenched his fists but didn't respond. He wanted to tell Liam the truth, that he wasn't crazy, that he was talking to the moon, but he knew better. Instead, he stayed quiet, retreating further into his shell. His sister Mira, however, wasn't so easily fooled. 2 years older than Ezra, Mira had always been protective of him. She noticed the changes in his behavior, the way he avoided eye contact, the dark circles under his eyes, and the sketches he drew in his notebook during class. At first, she thought he was just going through another phase. But when she caught him whispering to the sky one night, she decided to confront him. "What are you doing out here?" Mira demanded, stepping onto the roof where Ezra sat cross-legged, staring at the moon. Her arms were crossed, and her expression was a mix of annoyance and concern. "Nothing," Ezra mumbled, avoiding her gaze. He knew he couldn't lie to her. Not completely. Mira had a way of seeing right through him. "Don't give me that," she snapped. "You've been acting weird for weeks, talking to yourself, drawing those creepy pictures." She gestured toward his notebook, which lay open beside him. Its pages were filled with intricate diagrams of what looked like glowing structures buried beneath the moon's surface. "What is all this stuff?" Ezra hesitated. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he was afraid of how she'd react. Finally, he sighed and looked up at her. "Promise you won't laugh." Mira raised an eyebrow. "I'm not promising anything. Just spit it out." Taking a deep breath, Ezra explained everything. He told her about Lunara, the ancient consciousness living inside the moon, and how she had chosen him to help her reconnect with her creators. He described the strange sensations he'd been experiencing, the whispers, the shadows, the cold touch of metal, and showed her the glowing pulse of light Lunara sent whenever he spoke to her. To his surprise, Mira didn't laugh. Instead, her eyes widened in shock. "Wait, you're serious? You're actually talking to the moon?" "Yes," Ezra replied softly. "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true." For a moment, Mira just stared at him, processing what he'd said. Then, shaking her head, she muttered, "This is insane. Totally insane." Before Ezra could respond, Lunara pulsed again, her light growing brighter than usual. Mira gasped, stumbling backward. "Did you see that?" she exclaimed, pointing at the moon. It lit up." Ezra nodded. "That's Lunara. She's real, Mira. I wouldn't make this up." Mira sat down beside him, her earlier skepticism replaced by fascination. "Okay," she said slowly. "Let's say I believe you. What does she want from you?" "She needs my help," Ezra explained. "She says I'm the key to finding her creators again, but I don't know how to do it. I'm just a kid." Mira frowned, thinking, maybe we can figure it out together. We'll research old myths and scientific theories, anything that might give us clues. Over the next few days, Mira and Ezra pored over books and articles, searching for any mention of people who claimed to hear voices from the moon. They discovered stories dating back centuries, medieval tales of lunatics hearing whispers in the night, accounts from sailors who swore the moon guided them safely home, and even modern conspiracy theories about hidden messages in NASA's Apollo mission transcripts. One night, while flipping through an old astronomy book, Mira found a passage that caught her attention. "Listen to this," she said, reading aloud. "In ancient cultures, the moon was often seen as a bridge between worlds, a gateway connecting humanity to higher powers. Do you think that's what Lunara is? A bridge?" Ezra considered the idea. Maybe, but if she's a bridge, where does she lead? Their investigation took a darker turn when Ezra began sketching detailed images of what Lunara showed him. Massive structures hidden beneath the moon's surface, resembling roots or veins stretching deep into space. When Mira saw the drawings, she grew uneasy. "These look unnatural," she said, "like they're part of some kind of machine." A visiting astronomer named Dr. Paddle noticed the sketches during a school presentation. Intrigued, he pulled Ezra aside after class. "Where did you get these designs?" he asked, studying the notebook closely. "They're remarkably precise." Caught off guard, Ezra stammered, I just drew them." Dr. Patel narrowed his eyes. "These aren't random doodles, son. They match patterns detected by our instruments on the moon's surface." "How did you know about them?" Ezra panicked. He couldn't tell the truth. Not to a stranger. "I, saw them in a dream," he lied. The astronomer didn't seem convinced, but he let it go for now. As he walked away, Ezra felt a chill run down his spine. If Dr. Patel suspected something, who else might be watching? That night, lying on the rooftop with Mira beside him, Ezra voiced his fears. "What if people find out about Lunara? What if they try to stop us?" Mira placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll protect her," she promised, "no matter what." But deep down, Ezra wondered if protecting Lunara meant risking everything, including himself. As the days passed, Ezra's connection with Lunara grew stronger, but so did the challenges he faced. The strange sensations he experienced during the day became harder to ignore. Shadows flickered around him even in broad daylight, and the whispers in his mind grew louder, sometimes making it difficult for him to focus on anything else. His body felt weaker, too. He was tired all the time, as if something or someone was slowly draining his energy. Mira noticed the changes and grew increasingly worried. "You look awful," she said one afternoon as they sat together in their room. "Are you sure this thing isn't hurting you?" "It's not hurting me," Ezra insisted, though he wasn't entirely convinced himself. He hesitated before adding, "Lunara says our connection takes energy, but she promised she wouldn't let anything bad happen." Mira frowned. "And you trust her?" "Of course I do." Ezra snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. Sighing, he added more softly, "She's been honest with me so far. She needs my help, Mira. If I don't do this, no one will." Mira didn't argue further, but her expression made it clear she still had doubts. Deep down, Ezra shared them. He couldn't shake the feeling that Lunara was holding something back, that there was more to her story than she told him. One evening, as Ezra lay on the rooftop gazing at the moon, Lunara spoke to him again. "Ezra," her voice echoed gently in his mind. "It is time." "Time for what?" Ezra asked, sitting up straight. "To send a signal to my creators. You are ready." Ezra's heart raced. "What kind of signal? And how will I do it?" "Climb to the highest point near your home, the rocky hill overlooking the town. Focus your thoughts on reaching out to them. I will guide you." Ezra swallowed hard. This sounded risky, but he didn't have much choice. Lunara had never steered him wrong before. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." The next night, under the cover of darkness, Ezra set out for the hill with Mira by his side. She refused to let him go alone, insisting that she keep watch while he focused on whatever Lunera asked him to do. As they climbed the steep path leading to the summit, Ezra's nerves tightened. What if something went wrong? What if people saw what happened and came after him? When they reached the top, Ezra stood facing the moon, its silver light bathing the landscape below. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath and tried to clear his mind. Almost instantly, Lunara's presence filled his thoughts. Focus, Ezra, she urged. Think of the stars. Think of the vastness of space. Call to my creators, they will hear you. Ezra did as she instructed, pouring every ounce of concentration into imagining a message traveling across the galaxy. At first, nothing happened. Then suddenly, a surge of energy coursed through him, so powerful that it nearly knocked him off his feet. A blinding beam of light shot from the moon toward Earth, illuminating the entire sky. For a moment, everything was silent. Then chaos erupted. Back in town, people poured out of their homes, staring up at the glowing phenomenon. Some screamed in fear, others gasped in awe. Social media lit up with videos and photos of the event, sparking wild speculation about aliens, government experiments, and apocalyptic warnings. Scientists scrambled to explain the anomaly, deploying satellites and telescopes to study it further. But the real shock came moments later. The signal didn't stop with the initial burst. It triggered a chain reaction, awakening other dormant satellites scattered throughout the solar system. One by one, they began emitting signals of their own, each aimed at distant star systems. Ezra collapsed to his knees, exhausted. Mira rushed to his side, gripping his shoulders. Ezra, are you okay? I think so, he panted, though his whole body felt like lead. Looking up at the moon, he whispered, did it work? Lunara's response was faint but clear. Yes, Ezra, the message has been sent. Now we wait. Over the next few days, the world remained in turmoil. Governments launched investigations, trying to pinpoint the source of the signals. News reporters camped outside Ezra's town, interviewing locals and speculating about potential alien contact. Meanwhile, international agencies traced the activity back to the moon, and eventually to Ezra himself. Dr. Patel, the visiting astronomer who had questioned Ezra earlier, returned with a team of researchers. They arrived at the school unannounced, demanding to speak with him. When Ezra saw them approaching, his stomach dropped. Stay calm, Mira whispered, standing protectively beside him. We'll figure this out. The astronomers grilled Ezra with questions, asking about his sketches, his knowledge of the moon, and whether he had any involvement in the recent events. Ezra denied everything, sticking to the story that his drawings were inspired by dreams. But Dr. Patel wasn't satisfied. He gave Ezra a piercing look, as if he could see right through the lies. That night, unable to sleep, Ezra confided in Lunara. They're getting closer, he said. I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret. Do not fear, Ezra, Lunara replied. The hardest part is over. The signal has been sent. Soon, my creators, or their descendants, will respond. But what if they don't? Ezra asked, his voice trembling. What if I've risked everything for nothing? Lunara's tone softened. Even if they do not come, you have given me hope. For the first time in millennia, I feel alive again, because of you. Her words brought tears to Ezra's eyes. Despite everything, he knew he had made the right choice. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that the cost of their connection might be higher than either of them realized. The following night, driven by curiosity and desperation, Ezra decided to take a bold step. Using instructions provided by Lunara, he built a crude device designed to open a portal, a temporary window into the moon's hidden realm. With Mira's help, he carried the device to the same hill where he had sent the signal. Are you sure about this? Mira asked nervously as Ezra prepared the equipment. What if something goes wrong? I have to try, Ezra replied. If I'm going to keep helping Lunara, I need to understand her better. After setting up the device, Ezra activated it. A shimmering rift appeared in the air, glowing faintly with an ethereal light. Through the portal, Ezra glimpsed a desolate yet breathtaking landscape, the moon's hidden world. It was filled with glowing ruins, ancient structures that pulse with energy, and ghostly figures drifting silently among the debris. Ezra stared in awe, overwhelmed by the sight, but as quickly as the portal opened, it closed again, leaving only the cool night breeze behind. Collapsing onto the ground, Ezra turned to Mira, his face pale but determined. Now I know, he said. This isn't just about Lunara. It's about everyone who came before her, and maybe everyone who comes after. Mira hugged him tightly. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. But deep down, both of them knew that the journey was far from over, and that the choices ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. As the days stretched into weeks, Ezra's body began to show alarming signs of strain. The faint whispers in his mind turned into constant murmurs, making it hard for him to concentrate on anything else. Shadows followed him everywhere, even indoors, and strange marks started appearing on his skin, glowing patterns that resembled constellations. At first, they were barely noticeable, but soon they spread across his arms and chest, glowing softly in the dark like tiny stars etched onto his flesh. Mira noticed the changes too. One morning, she caught Ezra staring at his arm, where a cluster of glowing dots pulsed faintly. "What is that?" she asked, her voice tinged with panic. "It's part of Lunara," Ezra admitted reluctantly. "She says these are pathways, connections between us. They're how she shares her energy with me." "Energy? Ezra, you look like you're falling apart," Mira exclaimed. She grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to meet her gaze. "This isn't normal. You're getting weaker every day. What if this is killing you?" Ezra shook his head, though doubt flickered in his eyes. "Lunara wouldn't hurt me. She needs me to help her find her creators. That's all." But deep down, he wasn't so sure. His strength was fading, and he often felt dizzy or nauseous. Even simple tasks, like climbing the stairs or carrying his school bag, left him breathless. Doctors couldn't explain his symptoms. Blood tests showed nothing unusual, leaving his parents baffled and increasingly worried. Meanwhile, the world outside their small town continued to buzz with speculation about the mysterious lunar signals. Governments increased their efforts to trace the source, deploying drones and agents to investigate. News helicopters circled the skies above Ezra's home, capturing footage of the glowing moon and the strange anomalies it caused. Reporters camped out near the farmhouse, hoping to catch a glimpse of the boy rumored to be at the center of it all. One evening, as Ezra lay on the rooftop trying to rest, Lunara spoke to him again. Her voice was softer now, almost apologetic. "Ezra, I must tell you the truth. Our connection requires immense energy. Energy I have been drawing from your life force." Ezra's heart sank. He had suspected something like this, but hadn't wanted to believe it. "So, I'm dying." "Not yet," Lunara replied quickly. "But continuing our bond will come at a cost. You must decide. Sever the link and live a normal life, or complete my mission and risk losing everything, including yourself." Tears welled up in Ezra's eyes. He didn't want to die, but he also couldn't abandon Lunara after everything they'd been through together. She had trusted him, chosen him, and shown him wonders beyond imagination. How could he turn his back on her now? Desperate for guidance, Ezra confided in Mira. Sitting side by side on the roof under the starlit sky, he told her about Lunara's confession. "She says I have to choose," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to do." Mira placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You've done so much already, Ezra. No one can blame you for walking away if it means saving your life." "But what about Lunara?" Ezra countered. "She's alone, Mira. If I leave her, who will help her? Who will finish what we started?" Mira hesitated, torn between protecting her brother and supporting his decision. Finally, she said, "If you're going to keep going, we need to find another way. A way that doesn't hurt you." Inspired by her words, Ezra devised a plan. Using blueprints provided by Lunara, he and Mira worked tirelessly to build a device capable of amplifying her signal without draining Ezra's energy. It was risky and complicated, requiring parts scavenged from old electronics and tools borrowed from their neighbor's workshop. But they refused to give up, driven by the hope that this invention might save both Ezra and Lunara. On the night of the full moon, everything came to a head. Government agents surrounded the farmhouse, demanding answers. Their parents pleaded with Ezra to stay inside, but he knew he couldn't hide any longer. With Mira's help, he sneaked out of the house and climbed onto the roof of the local observatory, where the device would harness the moon's full power. The moment Ezra activated the machine, a surge of energy coursed through the air. A brilliant beam of light shot into the sky, illuminating the entire town. People gasped and cheered, pointing at the dazzling display. For a brief moment, it felt like magic, a miracle unfolding before their eyes. But the agents were closing in. Spotlights swept across the observatory roof, and voices shouted orders. Mira stood guard, stalling the agents while Ezra focused on maintaining the connection. Sweat dripped down his face as he poured every ounce of concentration into the task. Then, just as the agents reached the rooftop, something extraordinary happened. The beam of light transformed into a series of pulsating waves, each one carrying Lunara's message deeper into space. Moments later, a response arrived not from the moon, but from beyond the stars. A fleet of shimmering ships emerged from a wormhole high above Earth, their surfaces glowing with an otherworldly light. They hovered silently, casting long shadows over the landscape. The sight was breathtaking, awe-inspiring, and terrifying. Ezra collapsed to his knees, utterly spent. Mira rushed to his side, shielding him from the approaching agents. "It's done," Ezra whispered hoarsely. "They're here." The ships descended slowly, landing in the fields outside town. From within them stepped beings unlike anything Ezra had ever imagined. Tall and luminous, they radiated an aura of calm authority. One of them approached Ezra, its voice resonating in his mind. "We thank you, child. You have awakened our ancestor and restored her purpose." Ezra managed a weak smile. "Take care of her," he murmured. "She deserves to be free." With those final words, the beams boarded their ships, taking Lunara with them. As the vessels ascended into the sky, the glowing marks on Ezra's skin began to fade, and his strength slowly returned. Though he could no longer hear Lunara's voice, he knew she was finally at peace. Back home, Mira hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You did it, Ezra. You saved her." Ezra nodded, gazing up at the moon one last time. It shone brightly, as if smiling down at him. Despite everything, he felt a sense of closure and hope. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but he had played a part in solving one of them. And maybe, just maybe, Lunara was still watching over him from afar. The days that followed felt surreal for Ezra. The world was abuzz with questions about the mysterious ships that had appeared in the sky, delivered their message, and vanished just as quickly. News outlets speculated endlessly about alien contact, government cover-ups, and the role of a quiet boy from a small town who seemed to be at the center of it all. But despite the chaos swirling around him, Ezra felt strangely calm, like a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had finally been lifted. His parents were relieved to see him acting more like himself again. The glowing marks on his skin had faded completely, and his energy returned bit by bit. He no longer heard whispers in his mind or saw shadows shaped like craters. For the first time in weeks, he could focus on schoolwork, chores, and even conversations without feeling distracted or drained. Still, there was an emptiness inside him, a bittersweet ache where Lunara's presence used to be. Mira noticed it too. One evening, as they sat together on the rooftop gazing at the moon, she asked gently, "Do you miss her?" Ezra hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, I do. She wasn't just some ancient machine, Mira. She was alive, in her own way, and now she's gone." "But she's free," Mira reminded him. "Isn't that what you wanted? To help her find her creators?" "I guess so," Ezra replied softly. "It's just weird not hearing her voice anymore, like losing a friend." Mira smiled and nudged him playfully. "Well, maybe she's still out there somewhere, watching over you." Ezra glanced up at the moon, its soft glow unchanged by everything that had happened. Part of him liked to think that Lunara was still connected to him in some small way, even if it was only through memories and the faint hope that she was happy now. Life slowly began to return to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after such extraordinary events. The government agents eventually left, unable to prove any wrongdoing. They took notes, asked questions, and tested theories, but without concrete evidence linking Ezra directly to the lunar signals, they had no choice but to move on. Reporters lingered for a while longer, snapping photos of the farmhouse and interviewing neighbors, but interest waned as the weeks passed. Soon, the town went back to its quiet routines, though whispers about Ezra persisted among the locals. At school, things were different too. Some kids teased him mercilessly, calling him Moon Boy and making jokes about aliens and spaceships. Others treated him with cautious respect, as if he were somehow special. Ezra didn't care much either way. He kept to himself, focusing on his studies and spending time with Mira. Their bond had grown stronger through everything they'd been through together, and Ezra knew he could always count on her when things got tough. But the biggest change was within Ezra himself. The experience had transformed him, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. Before meeting Luna, he had felt invisible, like he didn't belong anywhere. Now he understood that being different wasn't something to hide. It was something to embrace. He had touched the stars, quite literally, and nothing could ever take that away from him. Years later, Ezra grew into a young man driven by curiosity and wonder. Inspired by his connection to Lunara, he pursued a career in astrophysics, studying the mysteries of the universe and searching for answers to questions humanity had yet to ask. On quiet nights, he still climbed onto rooftops, staring at the moon and wondering if Lunara was watching over him. Sometimes, when the wind carried a soft whisper through the trees, he smiled, convinced it was her way of saying hello. On one such night, years after the events that changed his life forever, Ezra stood on the roof of his university's observatory. He held the telescope steady, pointing it toward the moon. Through the lens, the surface looked peaceful and serene, untouched by the turmoil that had once unfolded beneath its glow. As he adjusted the focus, something caught his eye, a faint shimmer near the edge of a crater, almost imperceptible. For a moment, his heart skipped a beat. Was it possible? Could Lunara still be reaching out to him? He stared harder, squinting against the glare of moonlight. The shimmer disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving him unsure whether he'd imagined it. Shaking his head, Ezra chuckled softly to himself. Maybe it was just wishful thinking, or maybe, just maybe, Lunara was letting him know she was still out there, watching, waiting, and remembering. As he packed up his equipment and headed back inside, Ezra felt a sense of peace settle over him. Whatever the truth might be, he knew one thing for certain. His journey with Lunara had taught him that the universe was far bigger and far kinder than he'd ever imagined. It was a place full of secrets, yes, but also of beauty, connection, and endless possibilities. And though Lunara was gone, her legacy lived on, not just in the stars above, but in the heart of a boy who had dared to speak to the moon and received an answer in return.